Well, hi everybody. This is Sandy at Alva Cottage, and I am Suburban Homesteader, Wyoming. And it is very cold tonight. It's been cold all day long. I did a couple hours of work in the garden, and then I had to come in. It was too cold, and then it started to snow. It's May, and it started to snow. They were very beautiful. It was huge flakes slowly coming down, and they were melting as they hit the ground. And when it started to snow, then all the wind went away too, which was totally awesome. But then it started to rain later, and the wind came back. And so it's like 37 degrees out right now, and Joe's gone to work, and I was doing some stuff on the computer, and I had been asked some questions. And so I just thought it was an easy way for me to just answer the questions on a live. Now, I don't know if anybody will pop in, but maybe they can watch this later and that would answer their questions. And so I thought I would just do that. I find it interesting when people are tagged and they're supposed to say stuff about themselves. And I mean, on your videos, you give little snippets about yourself. But I thought this was an easy way to do those all at once. The first question was, how long have I been gardening? Now, if you don't count when I was a small child, because every summer I went to my grandma's farm, and we stayed there part of the time in the summertime. And my other grandmother that lived in town, she had gardens too. My dad had gardens. And so, not counting that, I really started gardening on my own really after about 18, 19 years old. And so over 40 years I have been gardening. The last about 15 years of that I've been a master gardener. And that was really interesting because when you garden a long time, you think, oh, well, you know a lot of things, but then you go through the Master Gardener course and you just learn so many things. It was fabulous. And I met just a ton of wonderful people that I have become close friends with. And so that was really a niche that I really liked. And so I guess I recommend going through the Master Gardener course, even if there are people that go through the course and they don't become master gardeners because they don't do the volunteer part. But if you have the opportunity, I would really say that you should try it. It's really cool. Next question was, want to know about my family. I'm married to Joe, and he's been on a couple videos. He doesn't like to be on the videos, so I have to kind of twist his arm to be on one. I always think it's so funny that that he even I can even get him to be on one, but it's okay. We have 7 children altogether between us. I had 5 and he had 2 when we got married. Gosh, we've been married 14 years now. And we have about 12 grandchildren. Because I like to count step-grandchildren. They're bonuses. One of the questions that I had was my very favorite vegetable to grow. And that's a tough thing to decide, but I really have to say tomatoes are my favorite. I grow so many different kinds. Usually I try to grow about 40 different types of tomatoes a year. But I use them a lot. I do sell some at farmers markets, but I'm not really doing much at farmers markets anymore. But I like to make V8 juice and sauces and salsas and just so many things with the tomatoes. We like to slice them. We like to put them in our salads. We just add them to all kinds of stuff. Then the next question was still garden related, because most of the questions that I've had are garden related. What was my favorite soft fruit to grow? And I grow a lot of different soft fruits. And so that was was interesting to try to decide, but I really think I have to say raspberries. I have a few different patches of raspberries around my yard. My largest patch is 8 by 8 by about 11, 12 feet. It's a triangle shape. And every year I get I freeze about 90 cups of raspberries from that, besides all the ones that we just eat. Because I go out there every single day during the summertime when they're ripening, and I pick and then I eat, and I think that stimulates them to make even more raspberries. My favorite fruit tree has to be apples, because I named my home Apple Cottage, and I have lots and lots of apple trees. Now we have about 14,000 square feet, which is about, I think that's about between a fourth and a third of an acre. And within those confines, besides my plums and peaches and apricots and pears and cherries, I have close to 100 apple trees. Now you probably figure, how can you have that many? But some of them I grow as bushes. Some of them, I have a lot of cordons, which means that they're just basically straight up and down. They can get about a foot and a half wide, and they grow about 8 or 10 feet tall. And I have sections that are kind of like almost hedges that kind of block, like one section blocks off our patio from the neighbors. And it's just a great way to grow a lot of apples in a small space, because it is just loaded with apples. And now, when you live in Wyoming, there are times that when the fruit is flowering on the trees, and all of a sudden we have horrible snowstorms or ice storms or freezes, and then you don't get as many apples or as many pears or plums or whatever. But there's always enough. Now, with building our big privacy fence all the way around our yard, I'm actually going to plant apple trees, and they're already growing. I've grafted them. Some of them are 2 years old, 3 years old. Some of them I did this year, some last year, and so they're more seedlings. Some of them are a little bit bigger than seedlings, but basically on certain sections of that fence, that privacy fence, I'm coming out about a foot, and I'm planting them basically about every 2 feet. And I'm going to espalier them. Some of them I'm just going to have straight up and down. Some of them I'm going to crisscross and just do different designs. And I'm going to wrap some of the branches so they do circles. Just fun things to do with them. And then, of course, around my flower beds, I've started planting what will be step-over apples. And those are apples that never get more than about 18 inches tall. They have a base and then 2 laterals that go out that follow the contours of the flower beds. And so it's just going to be like a border instead of having a little fence. So they'll be about 18 inches off the ground, and the apples will just be on those 2 branches. I have seen it done in England, and I just think it's fabulous. And then I have apples that are growing to be archways. And so they'll grow up, and eventually when they're big, there won't be any branches that come down. They'll just form the archway. And then when you go on that walkway, you're just going through a tunnel of apples. Now, you can't just have apples. You have to have pears and peaches and plums and cherries and all kinds of stuff like that, because you want to diversify. But I love the idea, if you're going to plant anyway, why not plant something you can use? Hi, Craig, and hi, Jake. How are you? Let's see. Craig says, for best results, you do have to go to fertilize for tomatoes. I do fertilize my tomatoes. I like fish emulsion, and I like compost. Jake says, hi, beekeepers. Check out my channel if you haven't. And I love beekeepers. So I hope everybody checks them out. If you just joined, I'm doing a live because people tagged me that I was supposed to share things about me. And so that's what I'm doing. One of the questions that somebody asked me was what some of my goals were, gardening goals. And I guess some of them would be on one section of our yard, we have what I call a food forest. And I don't mow there. If it gets too tall in some spots, I'll weed whack, but mostly I have just fruit trees and nut trees and a lot of different berries. And like right now, the whole hillside is filled with tulips. And it's just this burst of color. And then those will die back and the stuff will start to leaf out. And I put a lot of compost down and branches and pine needles and stuff. So it becomes like a forest floor. And eventually I would like to get some mushrooms that actually grow in our area to grow up there. The trees have to be a little bit larger before I can do that, just because it gets really hot in certain times of the day. But really, garden-wise, my biggest goal is I would like to write garden books. I mean, I've done a lot of speaking. I've written articles for gardening articles for a couple different magazines and newspapers. But I'd really like to do some gardening books on gardening in our area, not just Wyoming, South Dakota, Montana, North Dakota, Idaho, where a lot of the garden books, there are a few that come out, but really most of them they're not really for our region. They're not really for when you don't really get a plant until mid-May or the end of May. Sometimes it's the first part of June, depending on the weather that spring. And so I would like to show how much production you can do in our area. And I'd like to do some books on that. I'd like to do some books on specifically on vegetables that grow really well here, fruit trees that grow really well here, and flowers and berries that grow really well. So those are just some of the goals that I have. And I just thought that since people, they send me emails, because I post my email on all my videos. And I think people are interested in what you may not say on your YouTube channel, plus the things that you do say. And so I find that interesting. And I did come from South Dakota, where the soil is much better than it is in Wyoming. But that's just a matter of time and processes. When we first bought our house here 14 years ago, I moved 50 wheelbarrows of soil or more, because the way the slope was, we didn't want the water running into our house. I never found a single worm in any of those wheelbarrows. And in fact, I said to Joe, how can I garden without any worms? Because that is a key. If you don't have worms, your soil is really lacking things. But it just takes time. It's adding a lot of compost. It's a lot of just adding good things to your soil and being aware of your soil conditions. Hi, overworked gardener. How are ya? And now you can dig any place in my yard and you'll just get scoopfuls of worms. But it just takes time. A lot of times, because I am a master gardener and all the different things that we do, people will say, well, you can't grow anything in Gillette, Wyoming. Well, of course you can. It's just a matter of looking at your soil and figuring out what you need to add to help it. Sometimes it's just that it's been too hot. Your soil never has that cooling period during the summer. And I have seen where people have literally laid just bales of straw, one right next to each other, on where they wanted to have a garden space. And they just sat there for a couple of years, and those straw bales started breaking down, and there was always moisture there. And where the soil had been hard as a rock, now all of a sudden it is moist, and there's worms, and there's bugs, and there's creatures, and there's mycorrhizal fungi, and all this stuff inside. And so that makes it workable. And it makes it so that as that straw has broken down, it makes it a great garden spot. Then you can just take what's left of those bales after 2 years, take the strings off them, and just till it in. And you can have some wonderful garden space. Another thing you can do in our soils, because they're so clay, is raise beds. And that way you get to control everything that goes into your soil. And that can be really interesting to see the change of a 4x6 space where you couldn't hardly grow anything. And now you're adding the straw and the leaves and the soil and scraps from your vegetables and all this stuff that's adding into that raised bed, and how that can just change. And Overworked Gardener says, my clay soil is pretty dead, but I built raised beds and they work great. And that's true. They absolutely work fabulous. Hi, Healthy Homestead Chick. How are you, girl? And it's just a process that sometimes we are impatient. But if you can be, my kids are always saying, oh yeah, but mom's a patient gardener. I want this right now. But you have to be patient. You have to let that soil grow and build, and things where you only got 10 pounds of tomatoes off of a plant, then all of a sudden you've built that soil up and you're getting 20, 30, 40 pounds of tomatoes or more off of one tomato plant. And the longer you're a gardener, the more things you learn. Like, next week, I will plant some of my tomatoes in the ground and in raised beds. But I have to use walls of water or something to block off the wind and the cold. But walls of water are an easy thing to do. I take a small tomato cage and I flip it upside down. Then I slide the wall of water over top of it, fill up all those little cells with water, and plant my tomato in the center. Because the problem with walls of water when you live in some place where it's really windy is that it wants to tip over. Even if you stake it, sometimes the wind is just violent and it just collapses it. And sometimes that damages the plant. But if you have that small tomato cage upside down, there's no place for it to go. It just stays where it's supposed to. And so I'll actually put the tomato cage, the walls of water, fill it up, and I will let it sit for a couple days. Because what it will do is with the heat of the sunshine, it will warm the soil. And then I'll just reach in and I'll plant those tomatoes in there. And one of the projects I'm doing this year, Overworked Gardener has never heard of walls of water. What it is, it's a circular plastic and has these little cells all the way around. And the cells are open up on top, and you just fill them with water. And during the day, the water heats up, and so even if the nights are cool, it keeps the plant in there warm. So I've seen people use walls of waters for tomatoes, for peppers, actually even for cabbages and brassicas, like broccolis and stuff. They wanted to plant them even earlier. Though I did talk to a gardener the other day, and they said that they were having a hard time finding walls of water just because so many more people are gardening this year that don't usually garden. But a lot of times Walmart or some of the box stores will have some, so you just have to watch for them. But I'm going to do some tests. Victory begins in the garden. Where do you get them from? I have always ordered them online. So you might check Amazon. There's a garden place that's called Garden Supply, and a lot of times they will have them. But I have seen them in different box stores different years, so they might have them this year too. A lot of the Walls of Water comes out of a company in Montana. So you might just say Walls of Water and Montana, and it might send you to that company when you Google it. Arkansas Woodcutter, hello, how are ya? Overwood Gardener, it's really amazing what that wall of water can do to heat it up. And if you let them sit for a couple days before you plant, then the soil in there just gets so much warmer. Because the hardest thing for plants is cold soil temperature, especially if it's not a cool season plant like a tomato. And the test I'm going to do this year, because I have about probably 24 walls of water, half of them I'm going to take off after the tomato plant starts really getting big and it starts to push out of the walls of water, because they're about 18 inches tall. And the other ones I'm going to leave all summer long on there. And the reason I'm going to do is that because I talked to a gal from the University of Wyoming, and she does live in a part of the state which is colder than we are, but she leaves them on all summer long. And so I'm going to try that to see, same kind of tomato, one that I take off in June, one I leave all summer long, and just see the pounds of production that I get, the difference that it has. My only concern is that the tomato plants usually just get so big that I'm just not sure how the wall of water will affect it, but I'm going to try it anyway. And Arkansas Woodcutter says, I have seen these and wondered if they work well. This will be a good experiment. It is very exciting because every year I try to do a couple different experiments in my gardening. I like to trial tilling, no tilling, using the same kind of plants, adding different kinds of compost, different types of fertilizers. Like I really like fish emulsion and anything with seaweed or kelp, anything that's natural, because I don't put any chemicals on anything. And because of our weather, sometimes we do have a little bit of problem with aphids once in a while, but really we don't have a big problem with bugs. I never used to even have slugs even. And what I had to start doing is that if I was going to buy a plant, like a perennial at the nursery, I literally had to take it out of the pot, because otherwise sometimes there were slugs in there. And I mean, I bet you the first 8 years that I had gardens here in Wyoming, I never even had a slug. And now I have some, but I think I probably brought them in when I brought plants in. Overworked Gardener says, how is your indoor planter? I have not been getting notifications for your channel. Oh, I don't know. You have to like undo the bell and then do it again. But anyway, my hydroponics, that's the indoor planter she's talking about, has just been fabulous. And I started harvesting some of the lettuces. And so we've had them on sandwiches. I'm going to make some salads this weekend with them. Hey, His Way Homestead, how are you? If you haven't been over to His Way Homestead, Commander Bacon, he is a great guy. You'll have to check him out. But the hydroponic system that I got is just been fabulous. It is, it runs about 16 hours a day. That's what the light that I have set. And then the other 8, it's dark. But the system runs so that the way that it works, that you have 1 button up, 2 buttons down. So it runs and then it has this drying period, and it runs and has drying period. So about every 15 minutes or 20 minutes, it clicks on and it runs for a little bit. So it's filtering the water all through the hydroponic system. And I think the combination between the light and the way the water system and the nutrients that you put in there, it's just been crazy growing. Some of the tomatoes were a little slow to start, but I really think it was a great investment and something that I can use for like years and years and years. And in fact, I told my husband I wish I had 2 of them. But I will settle for 1, and it holds 30 plants. And so right now I have different kinds of lettuce, mustards, mustard greens, some cabbages in there, cucumbers, peppers. I'm actually growing some fruit trees in there because I put some apple seeds in there, and the apple trees are about this big right now. And I have a tree out in my yard that's called an OP367. It comes out of the University of Oregon, and they crossed American poplar with a Russian cottonwood. I think that's the way it goes. And OP was Oregon Project 367 that's the 367th tree that that was the one that they picked. It grows extremely fast. In fact, when I bought, it was just a little stick about 4 inches tall, and I rooted it. And in 3.5 years, it was 18 feet tall. And so it has the good parts of a poplar and the good parts of the cottonwood. Doesn't have any cotton that flies around. But it's not, how a poplar is very straight up and down. This spreads out a little bit more. And it is a fast growing one. So I have like 4 little sticks that I cut off, and they're all rooted. So I'm going to plant those in some pots, and then eventually I'll either give them away or plant them outside someplace. But they're just a fast grower. And there's a few companies across the United States that sell OP367s. And I don't know if any of you guys have different hydroponic systems, either inside or outside, because before I'd only done hydroponics outside. And my daughter bought one of these systems that I have. That's what all the white is over there. And I just fell in love with it from the first time I saw it. And she has just grown all kinds of stuff in there. Though what she does, she starts her tomatoes in there like in January. And then she moves them out of the system and puts them in pots. And then she's about to plant them outside because where she lives is much warmer than it is here. And I think that is a great thing, because otherwise the tomatoes can really take over the whole system. And who wants to have that? You want to have this variety. But I thought next winter, I'm going to have my parts up with all my salads and all that stuff growing. But then I'm going to use a lot of those for seedling production. And so that I can have some, maybe theoretically, have some tomatoes by the 4th of July. I mean, red tomatoes. I always have tomatoes by the 4th of July, but some actually really good ones by the 4th of July, which you guys probably laugh at because you probably always have them before the 4th of July. But in Wyoming, like last year, we had 11 inches of snow at the end of May. That makes a big difference on when you can have your tomatoes. We have a saying across the Midwest that your corn should be knee-high by the 4th of July. And I am growing some corn this year. I'm starting it out in the hoop house. And you know how the leaves come way out like that on a corn stalk? Well, these are variegated. They're striped. So there's light and dark greens in there. And then the corn cob is almost a black. It's like a purple black. And so I'm just going to try some just for fun. And Arkansas Woodcutter says, by the 4th, our tomatoes are nearly done. I'm so jealous. But, I have tomatoes all the way until October. So, and I always grow some tomatoes in the hoop house too, so that I can really extend it. And I've even had some that I've dug up put them in pots, and brought them in the house and had them for even longer. But the thing is that in the wintertime, even when I have them in the south window, they grow slowly, and I do get red tomatoes, but nothing like when it's in the summertime when it's outside. Someday, along our back patio, I would like to just make a solarium, like a greenhouse, so that I could have stuff basically all year round. Because in my hoop house, my greenhouse, and there are months that it's just plain too cold. I just can't do it. Have you checked out how the UK gardeners do their corn? It sounds like their growing conditions are similar to the UK in some respects. Oh, I do subscribe to some UK guys, gardener guys. So I will look at and find some of their videos that talk about how they do their corn. So that will be interesting, because corn doesn't really like to be transplanted, but that never stops me from growing some early so that I can transplant it. And corn is a fun, fabulous thing to grow. And I like the different colors. And I mean, some colored is just for decoration corn. Some is just for grinding up for cornmeal, but it doesn't really matter to me. It's beautiful. And this corn that I got from the seeds from Baker Seeds, I thought, when I saw those leaves and they were variegated, striped, it was just beautiful. And I thought, I'm buying some of those seeds. I have to try that. And so we'll see what happens. I'll do some videos when they start to grow, and I'll show everybody the colors of the leaves, and that could be real interesting. And one of the things I really like about YouTube is when you're watching other gardeners' videos, and they're showing all these different things that they're doing, and you're going, oh, I could do that. I could try that. And so I have all my gardens around the house, and then I have gardens at the community gardens, because I have an obsession with growing things. Don Course Plod just put out a garden update either today or yesterday. Okay, I will check both of those guys out and just see what they say, because I like the idea of, like, over in the UK and actually a lot of Europe, they have what they call allotments. And so there's different videos out there on their allotments, where our community gardens here in Wyoming anyway, I don't know if it's like that everywhere, you get maybe 20 by 20 space, where over in Europe, allotments, they are way bigger. And they get to have little houses, and they have all this stuff, and I just think it's fabulous. And it's interesting that around the country, how different we are in gardening, but in the same respect, how close we are that we're the same. It's just really interesting. And there's just like this bond with gardeners, and gardeners always want to share their knowledge. They always want to help people. They're always going to share their extra vegetables. They're just amazing people. And I just love that. Oh, in Finland, and does some, Benny L. Okay, I will check him out too. Very many people you include. Okay. I will check them out, and I'll go in there tonight and just see what's happening over in the UK, because I did learn something from a gal over in the UK just this year. So she had her containers that she was growing her tomatoes in. And they were probably about 4 by 4. And they were paper containers, but I think it would work with any kind of container. And then the tomatoes started getting too tall, and she was going to have to repot it. And so what she did was she took paper and she made a cylinder, and it was probably about 4 inches tall, maybe 3 inches taller than the pot. And she put that around the stalk of the tomato, and then she filled it with dirt, because a tomato, that stalk, if it's touching soil, it will make roots from the stalk, from the trunk of it. And I thought, what a great way of not having to repot your tomato before you put it outside. And I did tell her that I was going to steal that idea. And so I'm going to. In fact, I have a couple tomatoes I need to do that with. I need to separate them, and then I'm going to put them in the same size container, but then I'm going to add that paper cylinder. It basically looked like a toilet paper roll, only it was lighter material. And she said that she'll just bury the whole thing and it will biodegrade. And I thought, what a great idea. Because a lot of times, if the spring is cold and you have to wait before you can plant, and even the tall plants start to get leggy because they want to be outside. And I thought, what a perfect way of fixing that. So, gardeners love sharing things. But today here in Wyoming, 37 degrees, snowed earlier, then rained. Now it's stopped, but it does look like it's going to rain again. But it's still about, it's fluctuated. It's been down to 35. It's gone up to 39. So I figure it's probably going to stay in there. I don't think it's supposed to frost. So I think everything's fine out there. And none of my fruit trees, the flowers are about to open, but they're not open. The only exception to that are some of my black currants are open and my honeyberries are open. And so, thanks, Arkansas Woodcutter. I was glad you could visit too. Because I just did this on the spur of the moment because people had emailed me and tagged me and asked me questions. And I just thought, it's just so much easier just to go on and talk instead of doing a video, then uploading the video. And I just thought, nobody was home at my house. And so I was doing it tonight. But I suppose I should let you guys go. I just wanted to just check in, answer a few questions. I'll share it so that it stays on my YouTube under the live stream. And I just really appreciate that you guys stopped over. And I will check out those channels in the UK and see if I can see what they're doing with corn, which I'm sure is interesting. So thanks so much and have a great weekend. It's Thursday night, so if you have a long weekend, have a great time. And I will see you again when we garden together.